Hey, have you ever wondered how the government actually tracks who can be drafted for a war?
Oh man, it's a lot messier than people think.
Right. Imagine this. You blow out the candles on your 18th birthday, and alongside your new right to vote, you get a strict legal obligation. You have to tell the federal government exactly where you sleep every single night.
Yep, and you have to update them within 10 days every time you move, until you're 26.
Exactly. And if you don't, you are technically breaking the law, which, let's be real, millions of Americans are currently doing every single day without even realizing it.
Oh, absolutely, they have no idea.
Stick around till the end because what I'm about to share will completely change how you think about your personal data, the military, and government surveillance. So don't go anywhere. You're about to discover something awesome. Well, maybe terrifying is a better word for it.
Yeah, definitely a bit terrifying.
But first, don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe because we've got tons of fun deep dives coming your way. Let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so pulling this quiet policy change onto the radar is our mission today. We are unpacking an excerpt from a Democracy Now! Interview, and it details the U.S. government's incoming plan to start automatic military draft registration.
Which is a huge structural shift.
Massive. So our source features this interview with Edward Hasbrouck. He's an organizer with the Anti-Draft Coalition. And get this, he actually spent 6 months in federal prison back in the 1980s for publicly refusing to register for the draft.
Wow, 6 months.
Yeah. And we're also looking at some recent statements from the White House regarding President Trump's current stance on the draft. Now, before we get any further, I need to make something explicitly clear to you, our listener.
Right, the disclaimer.
Exactly. This source material contains politically charged content involving both left-wing activist perspectives like Hasbrouck and right-wing administration viewpoints. We're not taking any sides or endorsing the viewpoints of the original content. Our only goal today is to impartially report the ideas contained in the source material and help you understand the debate.
Because we just want to look at the mechanics of the policy, right?
Yeah.
The how and the why behind all these headlines.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Here's our blueprint. First, we'll look at the quiet failure of the current draft registry. Then, the logistical hurdles of the new automatic system. And finally, the broader implications for data privacy and, actual war planning.
So to start, we need to set the baseline here. The U.S. hasn't had an active military draft since 1973.
Right, end of the Vietnam War.
Exactly. But the Selective Service System has always maintained this registry of eligible men. The idea is to have a pool of names ready on day one if a massive conflict kicks off.
Right.
But they recently made a massive change to how that list is put together. They tucked a new rule into the 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, that mandates the automatic registration of eligible men, so ages 18 to 26, and this takes effect this coming December.
And the NDAA is, it's that must-pass annual military budget. Lawmakers can't just vote down funding for the whole armed forces, so they slip these controversial changes into its hundreds of pages.
Yeah, it's totally under the radar.
And the political context for this December deadline is super important. The source highlights a recent interview with White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt. She was on Fox News with Maria Bartiromo, and Bartiromo brought up that mothers are genuinely worried their kids might be drafted for a ground war.
Oh, wow. What did she say?
Well, Leavitt said that President Trump, quote, wisely does not remove options off of the table.
So keeping the draft alive is an option.
Exactly. Which brings us to Hasbrouck's context. Why automate this now? Well, Hasbrouck says the current manual system is just an absolute bureaucratic failure.
Yeah, I mean, you're supposed to go to the post office or go online within 30 days of turning 18 and then manually report every time you change your address.
Right, which nobody does.
Exactly. Compliance is just incredibly low. And the government's ability to enforce it basically collapsed in the early 1980s.
Yeah, the source explains that the legal hurdle to prosecute someone is just impossibly high. They can't just prove your name isn't in their database. They have to prove that you knowingly and willfully refused to register.
Which, I mean, how do you prove intent for not filling out a form?
Right. You could just tell a judge, oops, I forgot, or I never got the memo.
So the burden of proof is huge. The only way the DOJ could prove intent back in the 80s was if someone literally confessed publicly.
Which is exactly what Hasbrouck did, right?
Yes. The government targeted the loudest anti-war activists, people who went on TV or wrote op-eds saying, I'm defying the draft. Hasbrouck made public statements, the government used them in court, and he went to prison.
That is wild. They basically only prosecuted the people who mailed them a letter saying, hey, I'm breaking the law.
Pretty much. But Hasbrook points out that these show trials completely backfired. They just showed everyone how weak the government's enforcement actually was.
Right, it taught young people that there's safety in silence.
Exactly. Safety in numbers. If millions of people quietly ignore it, the government doesn't have the resources to prosecute them all. Nobody's been prosecuted for this in decades. Hasbrook claims the Selective Service only pushed this automatic plan to save their own jobs because of how badly the manual system failed.
Okay, but wait. If the manual system failed because people just stayed silent, doesn't automating it make perfect sense from the government side?
How do you mean?
I mean, it sounds like a modern solution to an old problem. If people won't fill out the forms, just have a computer pull their names from the databases you already have.
Well, sure, it sounds like a clean fix on paper, but to automate a system, you need reliable data. And Hasbrook argues this new plan is going to be a total fiasco.
A fiasco? Why?
Because the federal government fundamentally lacks the centralized, accurate data to make it work.
Let me push back on that for a second. In the age of big data, like tech giants and credit card companies know exactly where we live. Sometimes they know we're moving before we even pack our boxes.
Right, they track everything.
So it's hard to believe the government couldn't just use commercial data or their own massive archives to track draft-eligible men.
It's a fair point, but building a legally binding conscription registry is way different than, like, serving targeted ads. Unlike a lot of other countries, the U.S. doesn't have a centralized national citizen registry.
Right, we just have a bunch of separate databases.
Exactly. The IRS has your tax stuff, the DMV has your driving record, Social Security has its files, and they don't easily talk to each other. They use different formats, old software, and there are strict privacy laws. Hasbrook points out 3 massive data gaps that are going to ruin this automated system.
Okay, let's walk through them. Gap number 1, physical addresses.
Right. Think about 18 to 26-year-olds. They move constantly. Dorms, summer sublets, moving back with parents.
And there's no legal requirement to tell the federal government when you move.
Exactly. So if you skip filing taxes 1 year or don't update your license right away, the government's record of where you actually sleep is totally outdated.
Okay, what's the second gap?
Eligibility criteria. By law, the draft is based on sex assigned at birth.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. Many federal records, like passports or social security profiles, they've been updated to show a person's current gender identity, which might not match their sex assigned at birth.
So the databases aren't even tracking the exact metric the draft law requires.
Exactly. It's a data reconciliation nightmare.
And the third gap the source mentions is immigration status. The government just doesn't have the names and current addresses for every immigrant in the country.
Right, especially undocumented immigrants who obviously aren't sitting neatly in a federal tracking system.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like trying to build an automated, flawless master contact list for a massive high school reunion, but you're only allowed to use 50 different outdated address books, half of which are written in pencil and constantly changing.
That is a perfect analogy. The IRS tracks households, the DMV tracks drivers.
Yeah.
None of these were built to draft people into a war.
Right. And hey, make sure to comment below your thoughts on this, because I love hearing from you. Do you think the government could actually pull this off? Let us know. And trust me, you don't want to miss the exciting part at the end of the video. It's a game changer. Stay tuned, and let's make this journey unforgettable together.
Yeah, you really want to hear this next part. Because what's fascinating here is, even if they somehow merge all this messy data into one list, they hit the exact same wall they hit in the 1980s.
Enforcement.
Exactly. To actually draft someone, you have to provably notify them to report for duty. And if they don't show up, you have to prosecute them.
But you can't prosecute them if you can't prove they got the notice.
Right. If your automated list pulls an old address from a 3-year-old tax return, you can't provably notify them. Hasbrook says they might track down a few people for show trials, but you can't scale that up.
So if the database is going to be wildly inaccurate and practically impossible to enforce, why are they spending all this time and money to build it?
That is the million-dollar question. And Hasbrook argues the real value isn't the list itself. It's the massive data access that this new law authorizes.
Oh, okay. So this is where it shifts from just a logistical mess to a massive data privacy concern.
Yes. The new law taking effect in December doesn't just say make a list. It grants the Selective Service unprecedented power to obtain information from literally any other federal agency to help identify draftees.
Wow. It's essentially a skeleton key for data across the entire government.
A massive skeleton key. Hasbrook warns this creates a highly vulnerable database. And it's not just some future hypothetical. According to the source, late last year, the Selective Service gave official notice that they will turn over their existing registration list for, quote, immigration enforcement and other purposes.
Other purposes. That is such a broad, terrifying catch-all phrase.
It really is. And the source mentions a very specific, striking detail about who is already looking at this infrastructure.
Right. Shortly after President Trump's inauguration, the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, was sent in and given access to the Selective Service Registration Database.
Which raises so many red flags. DOGE is supposed to be cutting waste and improving financial efficiency. Why does a department focused on the budget need access to deeply personal data meant for a military draft?
That's a huge question. And Hasbrook points out that once this sensitive data names, real-time locations, sex assigned at birth, citizenship status, once that starts flowing to external entities like DOGE, we have no idea how those other purposes might be interpreted.
Exactly. He concludes that this system is highly likely to be weaponized against vulnerable groups. Specifically, he mentions trans youth and immigrant youth.
Right, because their data could be used by different agencies for enforcement actions that have literally nothing to do with military service.
Exactly. It morphs from a dusty filing cabinet into an active, interconnected domestic surveillance net.
So what does this all mean for the average person? I mean, beyond the domestic data tracking, Hasbrook argues there's a massive psychological implication here for global geopolitics.
Yes. The Pentagon isn't just maintaining this list for domestic policy, they're doing it to prop up what Hasbrook calls the myth of the fallback.
The myth of the fallback. Okay, break that down.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about how military planners run their strategy sessions. They do these complex simulations for potential wars. If their software assumes they have a near infinite fallback pool of millions of automated draftees, it completely alters their risk assessment.
It's like having a safety net. Even if the net is full of holes, just believing it's there makes you willing to jump from a higher platform.
Exactly. That myth enables war planners to map out larger, longer, and more expansive wars. Because they believe, hey, if we run out of volunteers, we can just activate the automated draft.
Right, so they don't have to confront that really uncomfortable question. Would enough people actually volunteer to fight this war we're planning?
Spot on. Hasbrook argues that removing the draft from the table entirely actually constrains wars before they happen.
Which is such a fascinating way to look at it, because we usually think of the anti-war movement as something that happens after the troops are deployed.
Right, people protesting in the streets once the conflict has already started. But Hasbrook is talking about a preventative constraint. If the government has to rely solely on a volunteer force, it places a hard cap on military expansionism.
You force the government to actually convince the public that the war is worth fighting.
Exactly. You have to secure their voluntary consent.
Now, the source does bring up a really important counterpoint here. The host of Democracy now asked Hasbrook about the economic draft.
Yes, this is crucial.
Right, because without a formal draft, the military relies heavily on people who enlist because they need the financial support or health care or college benefits. So lower income populations end up bearing the physical burden of our wars.
Yeah, the economic draft is a very real, harsh reality. Enlistment is often driven by a lack of civilian opportunities rather than, pure volunteerism.
But even acknowledging that, Hasbrook still insists that taking the formal legal draft off the table is the absolute necessary first step.
Right, because you have to remove that unlimited safety net from the war planners if you want to rein in the scale of future conflicts.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the full picture of what we've unpacked today. We started with this quiet little rule change tucked into the 2026 NDAA set for this December.
Right, the shift to automatic registration.
And we explored how the manual system completely collapsed in the 1980s because prosecuting quiet non-registrants was virtually impossible.
Then we broke down why automating that broken system is going to be a logistical disaster. Missing addresses, mismatched gender records, incomplete immigration data.
Which led us into the really dark part, the unprecedented data privacy concerns. The Selective Service getting a skeleton key to pull data from any federal agency, sharing it for immigration enforcement, and giving access to DOGE.
Which points to a huge risk of this data being used against vulnerable populations.
And finally, we examine how just the idea of this list, the myth of the fallback fuels endless war planning, which leaves us with a really provocative question for the digital age.
Yeah, Hasbrook points out that the manual draft was defeated in the 80s by young people just engaging in quiet non-cooperation. They just didn't mail the form.
Safety and silence.
Exactly. But how does civilian resistance work in an era where your data is automatically harvested? If they just pull your info from your taxes or your driver's license before you even have a chance to say no, how do you push back?
Oh, wow, yeah. If you can't just passively refuse to participate, what does active non-cooperation even look like in a modern surveillance state?
Yeah.
It completely flips the dynamic between the citizen and the government.
It really does. The traditional tools of civil disobedience have to completely evolve when the bureaucracy becomes fully automated.
That is a massive thought to sit with. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. Thank you so much for joining us as we explored the changing landscape of the military draft and federal data collection.
Yeah, we really hope this conversation helped clarify the mechanics behind the policy and those unseen implications of automating government data.
Keep questioning the systems around you. Keep looking for the why behind the what. And maybe the next time you see someone blowing out 18 candles on a birthday cake, you'll think a little differently about the data the government is moving behind the scenes.
Definitely.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this with your friends who'd love this too. Until next time, take care.